it does make me wonder if there's like something bigger picture happening here, because it is very hard to identify whatever is happening, because they've way too much talent and way too much experience to look as lost and as flat and as stupid as they've looked at several points during the season.
Pete had a tweet late in this game that I thought really kind of clocks the experience so far with the Bruins, which is every Bruins game this season is trying to kill me in its own special way. I don't think you need to elaborate on that.
But yeah, but I mean, I do, because obviously their record isn't like horrendous. They're like sub 500, but if you look at the standings, there could be an easy like, oh, you're just spoiled. This team's been great for the last like 10 years or whatever. Sure, but watch this team. I'm telling you, watch this team. It is unfathomable how bad they are.
They are,
and when they're quote unquote good, they're boring. And when they're bad and boring. There's no, like, the Leafs game was probably the most rewarding watching experience, but they didn't play a really great game. They looked better. They took a step forward, but even that game was excruciating. They almost gave it away.
Allowed a goal in the Ford Final Five. And that tweet gave us the idea to kind of check in with the fan bases that should be that are particularly frustrated with their teams. Bruins got to be near the top of the list. And if we were to do a frustration rankings, I've gone from don't worry about it, you're the Bruins, you're going to be fine, you're always going to get into the playoffs, you have goaltending, et cetera, to no, if you want to be pissed with this team and really annoyed right now and freaking out because the coach is in a walk year and they're playing so poorly, sure, because at some point they're through 10 games and they're, as I noted, sub 500, 4-5-1 on the season. Through 10 games last year, they were 9-0-1. Through 10 games the previous season, they were 9-1-0. So these are not your older brother or older sister's regular season Bruins. We all knew that they were going to be worse in the regular season because they traded Allmark, so they didn't have the goaltending. Did goaltending look like the problem last night? Jonas Korpisalo was their best player.
Exactly. Yeah, he was very good. You wasted a good performance from him. And like, yeah, you made the goaltending worse, and you can expect some regression there, like, because the Bruins' top-ranked goaltending over the past couple of years has masked some of their problems, at least in the regular season. But like you added pieces over the offseason. Like
you made yourself a better postseason team for sure, but still with a first-line center in Elias Lindholm. And your defense, man, you have, by my estimation, two really good defensemen in Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm, and two good defensemen in Brandon Carlo and Nikita Zadorov.
Yeah.
Even for a look, they'll be better in the postseason than in the regular season. You can't act like half a week is postseason-esque. You can't be like, hey, for this half a week, let's act as though we have to win these games and have the solid top six, good defense, good goaltending win out.
Yeah, in like the roster turnover is not significant enough to explain why this team looks so fucking lost. They have no chemistry together. They look completely lost. They're typically a well-coached team that's very responsible and at least like knows their assignments. Their breakout's terrible. They're bad around their net. They don't have any chemistry with each other. And like at some point it's gonna be really ugly for Lindholm and Zadorov if they don't turn it around, because those are the two guys that it's easiest to point the finger at outside of the coach to be like, well, they showed up and everything got fucked. And it's probably unfair, because at this point, I really do think it moves past any individual level. Yeah, they have a bunch of guys who could be playing better and could be producing, but like you look up and down that lineup, and with the exception of Swayman, there's nobody on that team that has really looked good to start the season. And it does make me wonder if there's like something bigger picture happening here, because it is very hard to identify whatever is happening, because they've way too much talent and way too much experience to look as lost and as flat and as stupid as they've looked at several points during the season. And I mean, we've talked about it already a few times. Like, you go into a season with a coach on the last year of his deal, that suggests that you are okay with like putting him in the firing line, or okay with him not being your coach at the end of the season. And I think the position that the Bruins have put Jim Montgomery in has forced everybody to ask, like, he's gotta be on the very hot seat right now.
Well, I mean, I would add him to the frustration rankings. Not that people should be frustrated with him. Like, should he feel frustrated that he's out there striking players, getting nothing out of it? Again, last night he yelled. He yelled again last night. And our friend Mike Felger has pointed this out. Every time he seems to have some big, like, I'm going to show them moment and I'm going to really get their attention moment, the next thing that happens is something bad. It's like they'll allow a goal or something, or that they'll have some sort of bad play. I think that he's probably like, what that, like, I can't, I'm in a lose-lose situation, because if they were going to extend him during the season, don't you think they would have done it at the beginning of the season? And God, no, I mean,
right after camp.
Were they so busy with crying about Jeremy Swayman in the media that they didn't have time to go to Jim Montgomery and say, hey, we're going to keep you at your current number. We're still, you've had some really good regular seasons, but we want more in the postseason. We're going to keep you at your current number, and you go from there. They couldn't have done that. And as I watch this team, I don't think that this team needs a coaching change, unless it is a Jay Woodcroft. I meant to make this joke earlier. You are the next coach of the Boston Bruins, because they just Woodcroft him, and they're like, we don't necessarily think this is your fault, but we have to do something. So, and we have to get to the playoffs. So see ya, you're gone.
That's why I'm saying, like, I think that his seat is no longer hot. It's burning. Like, what are their next moves? They're not going to make any like massive splash. Maybe you sign Tyler Johnson and see if like he helps. He's just hanging around waiting for a job. So I'd say that that's probably their next move. But like, if you lose your next couple games, I think Montgomery's fired. I just don't think that you have any other real course of action, and it's not gonna like really hamstring you or be expensive because you haven't given him in his next contract.
Right. When they fired Claude Julien, he had term on his contract, and when they fired Bruce Cassidy, he had term on his contract.
Hey, thanks for watching the channel.
We appreciate everybody who checks out our stuff, but 80% of our viewers are not actually subscribed to this page, so if you could smash that subscribe button, it would go a very long way for us.
The more subscriptions we have, the more visibility we get from YouTube, which allows us to do more.
So press that button. Thank you. The Bruins do have one win in their last 5 games, so if they do lose the next couple of games, which I looked at they have Philadelphia in 2 games. And Sean, who do they have next?
Next game is Carolina on tomorrow. And then, Flyers on Saturday in Philly, and then Kraken, and then the Toronto Maple Leafs in Toronto.
Okay, so Kraken have given them a hard time in the past. Philly apparently is just shutting them out. They're not able to score. They have 5-on-3 for like a minute and a half yesterday and don't score. Yeah, if they lose a couple of games, then you're looking at having lost 6 of 7. And the one win in this stretch, by the way, is against the Maple Leafs. And I put in my notes, does beating the Maple Leafs even count as like a feather in your cap, especially when you almost blow that game? Like that seems to me, you could say, is more of a Maple Leaf thing than them. The Maple Leafs are playing in Boston. They stink against you. They always find a way to lose. Maybe that's not as great a win as you would think.
Yeah, I mean, the Leafs were playing bad at the time, and you look at the Bruins' schedule, like they've not really played. They beat the Leafs twice or once, but you look at their schedule, and they've played some quote unquote good teams, but at the time, those teams weren't playing well. Like
Colorado.
Yeah. Like they weren't playing well. They lost to the Stars when the Stars weren't playing well. They lost to the Avs, or they beat the Avs when the Avs were a mess. Like, they really haven't played anybody super impressive at the time that they've played them. And they're still losing all these games. They're still ranking in the bottom third of like every meaningful category. They're not good at anything to start this season. So there's really nothing to give you a ton of confidence, a ton of inspiration moving forward, other than just like players on the roster that you've have been good at certain points in their career.
And that's like, I do still put a look. Sometimes good teams are just bad for a while,
Yeah.
and that's a stupid thing that is tough for us to wrap our heads around, because it's easy to say, okay, well, they're not trying or they're bad or whatever. Sometimes, like in life, you're having a bad couple of weeks at work or whatever, and just like shit isn't going right. I can't imagine it's for lack of trying. I can't imagine it's for lack of focus, just given what Marchand is. But
yeah, I don't think they're showing up to the rink every day being like, oh, this doesn't matter. But
yeah,
that's kind of why it's also surprising that they are this bad, because again, they've been such a consistent, such a hardworking team, such a committed to the craft, committed to the crest kind of team for the past 10 years. What changed this year where they all showed up and they couldn't figure it out right off the bat? Like, couldn't figure out anything right off the bat.
I would say that what they've gotten would be understandable from another team on this list we're going to discuss, which is the Penguins, where these results would make more sense for an old team with, why did you think that guy was going to work there stuff? Like,
or
I
just
guess
like
you
the
can
general
kinda,
outlook is more bleak in Pittsburgh than it is in Boston.
right. But like, if like, let's say like Pavel Zacha was in Pittsburgh or something and not killing it, you'd be like, oh yeah, why did it? But at the end of the day, the like Marchand and a lot of these guys that have been there for a minute aren't as like cobwebby as the whole situation in Pittsburgh.
Well, I guess like what Pittsburgh has that the Bruins don't have are like leaders, like real pillar leaders. And I wonder if there is some of that lacking with the Bruins. Like, obviously you have Marchand, obviously you have Pastrnak, who's like a bit on the quieter side. Like, I don't see him as like a real like intense leader in the way that like some other guys are. And when I look at the Bruins roster, I do wonder if they miss having like a few of those guys who can be the real like the guys who bring intensity and allow your team to reset when things aren't going right. Like, Marchand is the only guy that really jumps to the front of my mind who is that intense guy who's like, this isn't fucking good enough.
We'll have to do this math on this, and maybe we'll do it for another show. But Jim, our friend Jim, says Bruins roster stinks. Why is this so hard to figure out?
It doesn't.
The Bruins roster does not stink. They are definitely thin offensively, but off the top of my head, Bruins have a top third of the NHL roster, I would say, safely.
Top third? I don't know. Like, I think maybe like top half.
Definitely top half. Maybe it is closer to top half, but with what I said,
and even if you think that the Bruins,
awesome goalie,
yeah,
good to very good defense, good to very good first liners, or like
solid top six.
I was going to ask if you have any interest in today's practice lines, because they are quite interesting.
Yeah, they are. They're that guy Yelzy.
First line: Beecher, Zacha, Pastrnak. Second line: Marchand, Lindholm, Kastelik. Third: Jones, Coyle, Kepke. Fourth: Frederick, Poitras,
Brejol,
and Brezo. Yeah,
that's interesting. That's a real. Let's throw these in a blender. But yeah, like, even if you think the Bruins roster is a significant downgrade from what they've had the past couple of years, I think maybe that's fine, sure. But there is no question that this roster is capable of way more and way better than what you've seen to this point in the season. That's not up for debate.
So can we just get a grade on whether or not Bruins fans should be frustrated or mad? I put them at the top of the list of fans that should be pulling their hair out across the NHL. I'd say Bruins fans, number one.
It's not even close. I think that maybe it's a biased take.
I was going to say, like, it's probably close.
There's just different kinds of frustration. Like, if I'm a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, I'm also incredibly frustrated by what I'm watching. But at the same time, it's just like,
what did you expect?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you, before we move, like I say the Bruins are up at the very top, and it's not even close, because this is literally the worst type of team. It's disappointing based off of expectations. It's uninspiring based off of what you've seen on the ice. It's uninteresting from a fan perspective. And it's bleak based off of how little you have to provide you with inspiration beyond just like they should be better.
And I think to that point, like when the Oilers sucked, they still had the best players on the planet playing on that team. Like
Right.
I think generally speaking, the Bruins lack star power.
And like the Oilers sucked in an entertaining way. We were still
Yeah.
watching them being like, this is fucking crazy. It's a circus. Like, obviously, if you're a fan, it's not any big consolation, but at least you're watching an interesting product. You just watched the Bruins put up a fucking goose egg against one of the worst and most boring teams in the league. And somehow the Bruins look worse and more boring than them.
Frustrated, but are you worried? Like, are you like, when you put it in the context of like the rest of the NHL where a bunch of other teams, like you look at how the Avs started and stuff like that, like it's all kind of a mess, and they're still like, they're one of 4 teams with this record in their division, as we talked about. Like, are you worried about the season?
I mean, I'm worried. I'm not a doomer where I'm like, they're so fucked. Like there's no path from this. Got to blow up the team. Got to fire the coach. Got to fire the front office. Like, I think there's a path out for this team. They have a lot more talent than what they've shown and a lot better execution than what they've shown. I know they have it in them. It's just I'm worried based off of you've got 10 games on the record and you've seen almost nothing. Why? And I don't know the answer to it, but it worries me.
We all silly like the mayor.